Ravens are now on the clock.
Now that the Ravens have made their pick, let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about him.
It's always great to see a running back win the Heisman. It's like a sign that the old ways of ground and pound haven't completely vanished. He was a pure workhorse for the team and accounted for well over 60% of its total offensive production. Remove him from the team, and I strongly believe it wouldn't have finished at the top of its conference. And now he has the chance to carry the ball at the next level, and this team just got a gem of a player. We'll see if he becomes its primary ball carrier right from the start, or if it incorporates him into a running back by committee system.
Daddy, let me in.
The Colts are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock.
Let's go to Adam Schefter now, who's got more to say about the Dolphins' latest pick.
Every running back that played against him hated the experience, as he netted the most tackles for a loss of any player this year and setting a new school record along the way. As Matt Miller put it, he has a knack for watching the ball, never being fooled by the play action, and getting to the ball carrier in the backfield. He had the ability to single-handedly shut down an opponent's rushing attack in school, but we'll see if that translates to the NFL.
The Texans are now on the clock.
The Texans' pick is in. Let's go to Adam, who has more on Baca.
He's one of the more intriguing quarterback prospects this year, given his background is really more in baseball than football. It makes sense, then, that after just a season of playing in college, he's shown enough for this team to give him a chance. The arm and accuracy are certainly there. That much scouts have agreed on. The question will be, can he do the million other things that are asked of an NFL quarterback and leader?
The Jaguars have made their pick. Adam, what can you tell us about him?
He kicked off the offseason with one of the best all-star performances among defensive backs this year. How well did he play? As Matt Miller described, he simply took his matchup out of the play each and every time. The quarterbacks did their best avoiding him throughout the day, throwing to the other side of the field or the check down read. After he made such a big impression at the All-Star game, he backed up his play with a fantastic showing at the Combine and Pro Days. The team has to be grateful he was available at this point in the draft, and it didn't waste any time scooping him up.
Hold on now. This pick is trading teams.
The Saints are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. Chargers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock.
Now that the Texans have made their pick, let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more.
He's only been around the game of football for a few years, but when you look at his combine, you can see why he had so much success in college. This guy is pure athlete, and he looked faster than any of the other defensive linemen in the class. Matt Miller used his split times in the 40 and broad jump numbers to make the point that this kid has one of the fastest first steps of anyone in the class. He's the type of lineman that can get free from the block and be in the quarterback's face in an instant. He's a dynamic defensive lineman that can provide an immediate boost in production for this team's defense.
The Cowboys are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Redskins are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock.
What's wrong or right? Don't you ever get tired and feel like giving up?
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a trade.
The Chiefs are now on the clock.
Cardinals are off the clock now. Adam, what can you tell us about this guy?
He's a durable lineman who set a team record for consecutive starts, never missing a game throughout a decorated 4-year college career. Ross Tucker praised his footwork leading up to the Combine, where he did not disappoint, solidifying his position as the draft's top offensive line prospect. He has the potential to be the cornerstone of this offensive line for years to come and should provide consistent protection for a franchise quarterback. This is a great pick.
The Panthers are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock. The Packers are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Yeah, man. And they are challenge.
The Bears are now on the clock.
I'ma drop the hammer. Things done changed the hip hop since that Bobby out the slammer. Hip hop start on the East Coast and it moved.
The Vikings are now on the clock.
Vikings just made their pick. Adam, what can you tell us about him?
He was credited with having one of the biggest plays in college football this season. Late in the game, he picked off the quarterback and ran the entire field to score the game-winning touchdown. He did everything a coach would want to see, from baiting the quarterback to reading the downfield blocks. He flashed enough playmaking ability in that game and the remainder of the season to draw a lot of interest this offseason. This team has to be pretty happy with this pick.
The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock.
Now that the Cowboys have made their pick, let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about him.
A high-flying, hard-hitting defensive back, he was the subject of much criticism earlier this year after being unable to put together consistent performances week to week. Consistency doesn't even do the roller coaster of emotions he went through justice. A better description may have been puzzling. After turning in an exceptional performance in week 1 with 2 picks, he was downright terrible in week 2, being burned for 3 touchdowns. Week 3 saw him force a fumble and return it for a touchdown, and then Week 4 saw him get beat on plays that led to critical scores in a close loss. The pendulum continued to swing both ways throughout the entire year, prompting one scout I spoke with to nickname him the Enigma. This pick could have a huge upside, providing this coaching staff has the patience for him to develop into a much more consistent player.
The Rams are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock.
Adam, what can you tell us about that last pick?
Matt Miller told me to look at a certain stat in regards to this defensive back, and that's average number of targets in a game. Not surprisingly, you see that number start to fall each week. He was a master of the bait and switch early in the year, on track to break records midway through the season. Eventually, quarterbacks gave up altogether trying to throw the ball in his direction, essentially taking away a receiver on every play. There's going to be an adjustment period now that he's in the NFL, but he certainly has the potential to be a shutdown defender for this team in the future.
The Lions are now on the clock. The Seahawks are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock.
Adam, what can you tell us about the Titans' newest player?
He's a linebacker that wasn't particularly high on anyone's board coming into the offseason. But after the Combine and Pro Day, his name started getting circulated around draft circles as a potential sleeper in this class. And when I spoke to Matt Miller, he told me it wasn't really what he did, but what he didn't do that got everyone's attention. He finished either average or above that in every major test for a linebacker. What you get is a guy that can do everything asked of him and room to grow in several different areas. Coaches like guys in the middle of the field that they don't have to worry about taking out in certain downs, and he can provide that for this team.
Parents' basement, yeah, big neck. Come up with a beat that's gonna break your neck.
The Chiefs are now on the clock. The Eagles are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Yeah, you can hear me now. Yeah, you can hear me now. Turn it up to 11. Blow it up straight to heaven. Dropping big beats, so they gotta listen. Yeah, you can hear me now. We're just a couple of weirdos coming to your city, sending bass into your earlobes like your bleached out hairdos. We glowing in the dark, got the spark, about to flare the fuse. That's just how we do.
The Steelers are now on the clock.
Skydiving off your parents' roof. Saw the magician's assistant in half like who the are you? Who the are you? Who the are we? We be the dudes who just come over to water the lawn. We don't.
The Packers are now on the clock.
The pick's been made. Let's go to Adam Schefter to hear more about the player.
How quickly a year flies by. It's hard to believe that it was just 1 year ago that this kid caused a media firestorm when he announced he'd be staying in school for his senior season to make a run at the championship. Since that announcement, all he's done is win games, impress scouts, and validate why NFL teams have been so excited for him to finally graduate. At the same time, several analysts predicted staying another year in school may hurt his draft stock. Todd McShay even called the decision a gamble. GMs I talked to disagreed, feeling that the extra year has made him even more dynamic. He's an NFL-ready talent who should be able to find the field very quickly.
The Colts are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock.
All right, team is now off the clock. Adam Schefter, can you tell us about their newest player?
Long talked about as a top 3 defensive back prospect, his draft stock fell dramatically after a series of consecutive struggles late in the season against inferior wide receivers. Many speculated that these struggles were due to a series of nagging injuries, a theory which may have been validated by his strong performance at his pro day. I was able to talk with several GMs about him at the Combine, and they told me he possesses the raw physical skills needed to become a top-tier NFL defensive back. 3 skills in particular were mentioned by every GM I spoke to: exceptional physicality at the line of scrimmage, a nose for the ball, and better hands than most receivers they've seen in scouting. The reason for his collegiate struggles may forever be shrouded in mystery, but will soon be forgotten if he's able to realize his full football potential.
The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Texans are now on the clock. The Bengals are now on the clock.
Our very own Adam Schefter has more to say about this pick.
After a string of injuries his junior year and what looked like more of the same his senior year, he made the decision to leave the team. It was a difficult choice to make, but after consulting with the trainers and coaches, it seemed like the best long-term option. His body needed more time to heal from past injuries, and opting out of his senior year helped him make a complete recovery in preparation for the draft. So even though there wasn't a lot of recent tape on him, he did put on a good show at the Combine, convincing scouts he hadn't lost a step. Some teams were concerned with his competitiveness after foregoing that final year of eligibility, but at least one team was confident enough to pick him up. Now we'll see if this team can keep him healthy and on the field.
Adam, what can you tell us about Nix here?
His draft stock took a hit at his pro day when he failed to look natural in any of the drop back and ball reaction drills. As Matt Miller put it looked like the sun was in his eyes every time he turned around to look for the ball. Sometimes the receiver would break to the right, but he would go to the left too many times. Think with enough coaching, he can sharpen his ability to play in single coverage. We'll see if he becomes a starter at some point down the line for this team.
The Rams are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock.
All right, let's go to Adam Schefter, who's got more on this pick.
You know when an offensive lineman has a good game, you usually don't notice him. Well, you couldn't help but notice this kid during the All-Star game. Any pressure the quarterback got that day usually came directly from his area. He blocked the wrong defenders on several plays and got completely manhandled on others. Matt Miller gave him the benefit of the doubt, explaining to me that some linemen are slow to adapt to new schemes. If that's the case, then maybe with time, he can become a dependable blocker for the team. I'm sure that's what the GM is hoping for, too.
This aching pain when you're away, like a mighty ship that sets the sails to you. Fingertips, that's my lips, make me sing that holy song the way you do.
The Lions are now on the clock.
Holy Ghost inside, let it loose and lay it on. Only one that can save me now is you. Healing, oh, I need a healing. I can feel it now, I can feel it now.
The Redskins are now on the clock.
Oh, I need a healing. I can feel it now, I can feel it now. Got to get it on. Oh, I need it. Oh, I need it.
The Titans are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock.
Redskins plan to go climbing. They've just picked Hill.
If you go back and watch his pro day workout, you'll see this guy was a beast. One NFL defensive line coach put him through a brutal series of drills, and he came out of each one hungry for more. Matt Miller watched him on the sidelines and noticed he never took a knee, never got water, was always quick back to the line for another round. I spoke with the coach who ran his drills, and even he came away very impressed. It was his goal to find the kid's breaking point, but it never made an appearance. He's got a motor I can see causing fits for any offensive line. With this pick, their defensive line just got a much-needed injection of energy and attitude.
Like a river, shut your mouth and run me like a river. How do we fall in love?
The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Could hit ya. How do we fall apart? Faster than a hairpin trigger. Don't you say, don't you say, don't say, don't you say. One breath, it'll just break it.
The Broncos are now on the clock.
Run me like a river. Shut your mouth, baby, stand and deliver. Holy hands, holy, make me a sinner. Like a river, like
The Packers are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Giants are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Vikings are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock. The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Ravens are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The 49ers are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock.
All right, now that the pick's in, let's go to Adam. Adam, what can you tell us about this guy?
The importance of a lockdown pass defender cannot be emphasized enough, and that's exactly what every GM I talked to described him as. His ability to play physical and to outwork his opposition off the line have also been areas of high praise on his journey to the draft. This skill set could be seen in numerous games this year where he completely shut down some of this draft's top-rated wide receivers. When you're tasked with neutralizing an opponent's number one wideout each week, there's a great deal of responsibility to ensure you're not just physically ready, but also mentally ready. This is another important trait the GMs I spoke with mentioned to me that made them so excited about this guy. The hope is that he will quickly learn the playbook, get some solid reps in the preseason, and come week one, be ready to play.
run me like a river, 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 like a river.
The Bengals are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Rams are now on the clock. The Jets are now on the clock. The Broncos are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Lions are now on the clock. The Bears are now on the clock. The Chargers are now on the clock. The Titans are now on the clock. The Cowboys are now on the clock. The Chiefs are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock. The Steelers are now on the clock.
Let's go to Adam now, who's got more on the Steelers' last pick.
One of the nation's elite running backs until a major injury halted his progress, this is a pick that has tremendous upside associated with it. Many scouts I talk to do not believe his knee is anywhere near 100% and is still months away from regaining the strength needed to make hard cuts and the explosive first step he once had. One source even told me that rushing this kid back to the field is a recipe for disaster, possibly causing additional damage to the knee. The jury's still out on whether or not he'll return to the dominant running style he had in college, but with patience and a training staff dedicated to his rehab, this team could have a very capable running back for years to come.
If you want it, baby, you can have it all. But then you better turn.
The Giants are now on the clock.
You know you got to turn to make the heart go. I said you better turn and put your hand on the conceited. You know you got to turn to keep them begging for.
The Bears are now on the clock.
Don't lose your way. Don't make mistakes. You're gonna learn to fight many days in so many ways. Ain't nothing gonna shake me, 'cause you'll always be my baby.
The Buccaneers are now on the clock.
More I want for you, my love. That's what you really want. Must be what you really want. If that's what you really want, my love. Lord, I said you better turn up and make it something to believe in. You know you got to turn up to make the heart go. I said you got to turn up and play your cards where I can see them. You know you got to turn up to keep them begging for.
I see both teams filling out cards. You know what that means? We've got a trade.
The Vikings are now on the clock. The Dolphins are now on the clock.
Said tonight,
The Buccaneers are now on the clock.
so we invited everybody. The made, well, they're way too strong, but ain't nobody saying sorry. The speaker's so blown, no one knows what it is. But
Well, if you're wondering what the delay is, I think we've got a trade coming here.
only to it, we got the rest of our lives for the rest.
The Buccaneers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Browns are now on the clock. The Raiders are now on the clock. The Bills are now on the clock.
Just shaking our heads, but right now we're too fast to slow down just yet. We're doing it our way, just acting our age. Just acting our age.
The Chargers are now on the clock.
There's people here that I just met, but we're acting like we go back. It's 3 a.m., but we ain't done yet. Trying our best to make it last.
The Seahawks are now on the clock.
Through us like an open. We're too high on being young and there's still to race. We've got the rest of our lives for the rest of our lives. And the rest of tonight for whatever feels right. We're doing
The Texans are now on the clock.
acting our age. One day we'll look back just shaking our heads. But right now we're too fast to slow down just yet. We're doing it our way, just acting our age.
The Bengals are now on the clock.
Just acting our age. We're too loud, we're too proud, we're too high to come back down. We don't think, we don't plan, we stay as long as we can.
The Vikings are now on the clock.
As long as we can. We got the rest of our lives for the rest of our lives. And the rest of tonight for whatever feels right. We're doing it our way.
The Eagles are now on the clock.
One day we'll look back just shaking our heads. But right now we're too fast to slow down just yet. We're doing it our way, just acting our age. Just acting our,
The Rams are now on the clock.
just acting our age.
The Jets are now on the clock.
Do something crazy.
The Broncos are now on the clock.
I wanna live like it's Mardi Gras and go dumb with my whole squad and don't need no R&R. To regular life, I say au revoir. Hey, living life in the fast lane. Million pain, only beat. So please come join me. One thing, good vibes only. I just tapped,
The Raiders are now on the clock.
got fireworks. Let's blow some down. Tonight I'm going stupid, doing things I've never done. We all got one thing in common. We just wanna have fun. Hey.
The Bills are now on the clock.
Something crazy. Do something crazy. Do something wild. Be someone different. Switch up that style. Yeah, come by, bring a
The Seahawks are now on the clock.
bunch of snacks and where we going? You don't need a map. You don't need a nap. You don't need jack. Except lots of people, some very loud speakers, cold drinks and good. Join me. One thing, good vibes only. I just tapped. I'ma fill my cup. Got fireworks.
The Ravens are now on the clock.
Tonight I'm going stupid. Doing things I've never done. We all got one thing in common. We just wanna have fun. Hey. Think about to do it. Think about to do it. Do something crazy.
The Titans are now on the clock. The Panthers are now on the clock. The Jaguars are now on the clock. The Patriots are now on the clock.
Someone different.
The Steelers are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock.
Break it down. Do something crazy.
Do something crazy. Other side, I'ma fill my cup. Got fireworks. Let's blow some down. Tonight I'm going stupid, doing things I've never done. We all got one thing in common. We just wanna have fun. Hey, what you wanna do? Think about to do it. Think about to do it. Do something crazy.
The Ravens are now on the clock. The Cardinals are now on the clock.
I'm tired of this in the kitchen. But how else am I gonna get it? 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 I put it in Javic. I got the dripping.
The Falcons are now on the clock.
Promise I'm gon' oh, what's am I gon' get it? I had to trap at the vacant. Swerving around in Vegas, mama, we finally made it. Order with the racks, I'm a trap star. She a ride like a star. The bricks in the backyard. Try to ride a in a white heart. I can't take up on a date, cause I can't get dinner.
The Cardinals are now on the clock.
I'm tired of this in the kitchen. But how else am I gon' get it? 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 I'm getting kinda tired.
The Steelers are now on the clock.
How else am I gon' get it? 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 Whip!
The Cardinals are now on the clock.
How else am I gon' get it? How else am I gon' get it? Whip!
The Vikings are now on the clock.
How else am I gon' get it? How else am I gon' get it? Whip! You know my is the best. I feel like I should stop and retire as a vet and probably maybe put on a new.
The Cardinals are now on the clock.
I'm in a cruise ship. I'm tired of this in the kitchen. But how else am I gon' get it? 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 I'm getting kinda tired of all this in the kitchen. How else am I gon' get it? 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 Whip! How else am I gon' get it? How else am I gon' get it? Whip! How else am I gon' get it? How else am I gon' get it?
The Steelers are now on the clock.
Can I get a witness in the darkness? 'Cause there ain't no love at all to be found. Feeling like a freight train, trying to break chains. Everybody needs somebody, no doubt. Sugar, just step into